Hi guys, and welcome to our live stream. Today is Thursday. It is sunny. It's gorgeous. It's cold though. I walked this morning and I think I froze my ears. I thought they were going to fall off, quite frankly. Did that bad choice of clothing. Anyways, welcome to the live stream. I'm going to let all of you sort of catch up, get signed on, say hello, all that kind of stuff. Definitely say hello and let us know that you're here. Apparently, Steph already said Lynn is here. So, hi, Lynn. Welcome aboard. And for those of you who may not know where to look for your chat, usually it's on the right hand side of your computer or your tablet. You do have to take it off full screen mode in order to see it though. So throughout the live stream, I'll be pausing every once in a while to ask Steph if there's any questions. If you have some, just drop them in. If it seems like a question that needs to be answered sooner than later, she's actually going to shout out to me and let me know that somebody has a question. So definitely feel like you can interact, and we do have that being monitored as we go. Anyways, so here we are. We today are going to paint this lovely water splash. So hopefully all of you have showed up to this lesson with a canvas that's baked out in black. So if you haven't, I'm going to suggest while I'm actually chatting that you break out your black, and it can be any black, and get a nice solid coat on your canvas and it dries. So I'm going to just chat about the water splash for a moment, and that'll give you a couple of minutes to sort of catch up and do that. And I'm just going to check in with Steph here and make sure that we're all good on the live side of things because she's our live monitor.
We are good.
We are good. Awesome. Good to know. Okay, so we're going to talk about this water splash a little bit in its just in its structure. And water is kind of my jam. I love doing water. And this one is it's kind of a simple, nice way to start and look and talk about water and how it moves and how it flows and, you know, what sort of happens with water. So when we look at it, I want you to look at this splash in its structure, in that it's got this base where it has hit and it's reflecting back up again. And when it does that, it always has this symmetrical space along the bottom. So this side and this side are going to be symmetrical. And then we have these pieces that kind of come out like a crown. So this is actually called a crown splash for that reason. And then when we look at it, we have what's the back part of it. So this is the inside of the back. And then we have this front part. So when we sort of start painting it, I'm going to show you how to separate that out at the very end. We're not going to worry about that too terribly much. Where we're going to start, though, is we're actually just going to take a light marking pencil. And I always use one of these, which is a watercolor pencil. This is a white watercolor pencil. And this is a Derwent watercolor pencil. You can use a chalk pencil or anything like that. And I use this when I'm working on black to sort of do my outline. So I'm going to, on this canvas, on our blank canvas, I'm actually going to just kind of make some markings. And I don't want you to be afraid of the drawing process right now, because what you're looking for is some stable things. It's from here to here and from here to here, that they're sort of on that same structural angle. How many points you have coming up and where they are exactly is actually kind of irrelevant. So we're not going to worry about that. And I don't want you to be too stressed about it and how you're going to draw it. So hopefully, through all that talking, those of you who didn't have it painted black already have got your piece painted black. And hopefully you've got your white marking pencil ready. And we're just going to jump right to our canvas. And I'm going to start just somewhere in here. I'm going to take it in a couple inches on either side. I'm just going to make a little mark here on this side and a little mark here on this side, because this is where I want it to be that equal distance coming from the center. And then I'm going to take this line up to here and take that line up to there. So I'm going to take this line and I'm just going to bring it a little ways up on the right hand side and a little ways up on the left hand side. This does not need to be exact at all. And then I'm going to take I'm going to decide this arm here where I'm going to bring it to. And I usually plan that out before I actually make my mark on my canvas. So I'm going to just say, you know what, I'm going to bring it up to here. So it gives my pencil somewhere to head. So I'm not making a real detailed drawing, but I'm going to decide where the end of it is and how it comes down and where it meets up to that piece on the bottom. I'm going to draw the other side of it, and there might be a piece that comes down in here. Again, I'm not drawing this really detailed at all. I'm going to add another little piece on here. And I'm just going to kind of scraggle it down the side. And then I'm going to build this other side up and go kind of get to where I'm going to on this side again. And sketch that in. And take another piece up here and sketch that in. That's going to be this piece that kind of comes around. And this one here, I'm actually going to decide. This one here I am going to bring down as a front piece. So I am going to decide right now where that piece is going to come to. So I'm going to take it from this front, and I'm going to actually figure out where that little bit of a piece is coming to on the front. And then this back piece comes in. I have another round piece coming off the back here. Again, this is so not important as to, is yours exactly the same as mine? You know, does it have the same number of points? Do they end up in the same space or length, or any of those things are just so not important. I am, though, going to decide that in behind here, there's a piece that kind of comes up, splashes up, and it has a little piece. And I'm going to decide where I might put a couple of extra little splashes coming off the end. And I'm just going to put those pieces in there. None of this is got any detail whatsoever. So that's my basic structure. So just so it gives me a sense of, the only other piece that's really super important in this is where the water is hitting here and it's most solid, okay, and where there's the most light. So I'm going to figure out where that line is going to come across, and then I'm going to build this line in here. I want to know where those pieces are, because those actually structurally really affect how your water looks. So I'm going to kind of take this guy and say halfway up here, about halfway, I'm going to build. I can't draw and hold a thing at the same time. So there's my piece that comes across, and I'm then going to bring this one, curl it up inside a little bit, because this is just where my light is going to be at its brightest. And that ends up coming around a little bit. So now what I end up with is the basic structure of my splash, my crown splash. So I have where it's its thickest, where the light is going to capture the most water and create the most shadow. I have my foreground and my background of my splash. So I'm going to let you sort of get your own piece to there. If you have any questions about that, definitely throw that out there. While you're continuing to draw, I'm going to decide that I'm putting a couple more little splashes that are going to come out the other side. None of that is a real complex sort of, it's not a complex drawing. I'm just deciding where am I placing this stuff. That's all I'm doing at this point in time. So as I am getting to there, how are we doing, Steph? I got the thumbs up. So I'm going to assume that if you have a question, you're going to reach out. So today, mostly what I'm going to be painting with is this brush here. And hopefully you can see it in this palette cam here. So I'm going to paint 99% of my painting with this brush. It's an Escoda pointed round. It's a number 8. I also have here a number 12. So both of those brushes are perfectly fine. I like a pointed round because it's very, very flexible brush. If you don't have a pointed round, you can use a round brush. This happens to be a round brush here. It's a pretty small one. But trying to find a round and the difference between the two tips. So here's two different companies of brushes, and they're both pointed rounds, and they're both 16s. So this is a Curry's brand brush, and this is an Escoda brush. You can see the difference in the tip and how much more pointed and therefore more flexible that becomes. This Curry's brand is also a decent brush. You can use those. So if you had a 12 or a 10, you can see the difference in size though, because this one's a 12, this one's a 16, and yet this 16 is massively different. There isn't a standard, unfortunately, brush sizing scale with brush manufacturers, which is incredibly unfortunate. It would be really nice if there was, but I mean, it's kind of like clothes, you know. You can have a size 4 pair of jeans from one company and a size 4 pair of jeans from another company, and yeah, not the same thing. It's a problem, right, Steph?
It's a problem.
It's a problem, I know. And the more expensive they are, it seems like the smaller the number you have to go to. That's all I have to say, which makes me crazy. So we're going to start with pretty much doing this entire painting with a titanium white. I use a golden brand. This is a golden fluid acrylic. I also have here an ivory black, and this happens to be a Liquitex soft body. I'm going to use some Paynes Grey. Paynes Grey, for those of you who don't know, is like a blue-black. So it's good for mixing. And I'm going to use a dark blue. I have an Ethacquinine. I can't even ever pronounce that blue. I love this blue. It's a great blue. Anyways, I should be able to pronounce it, but I can't. Just saying. So I'm going to throw in a little bit of white. White is mostly where we're going to go with this and what we're going to spend most of our time doing right now. And I'm going to take some of that white, and I want to just sort of start to base in. So on my palette, what you can see is I've kept a wet brush, and I'm just pulling it out into this milk consistency. You know, the golden fluid acrylics are kind of like heavy cream, 35% cream, and adding a little bit of water to it to be that dairy sort of consistency. So because I'm right-handed, I'm going to start on the left-hand side of my painting. For those of you who are left-handed, you can start on the right-hand side. The theory and the concept is all the same. It doesn't really matter. And where I normally start is up here, and I'm just going to start to put in the underside and start to pull in the brightest highlights. So recognizing that in this, the light is actually coming from the top, which means it's going to capture light where the water is the thickest, and that's really where it's capturing, where it's got where the water is the most dense. It's where it's going to capture its light. So it could actually be both on the underside and on the top side, depending on the shape or the thickness. So if you think about where this shape of this end piece is of this water drop, it's actually going to catch an inside reflection here. And then it's also going to catch some reflection on the underside. So I'm just going to start to kind of put this in, not in any solid way, not in a solid stroke, and I'm not going to carry it all the way to the bottom. All I'm doing is just saying, where do I want this to be? And add a little piece onto the other side, and just going to carry it down. Again, none of these lines are ever going to be completely solid because they never would be. So as I carry this down, I've carried some line down there because that's the energy of the water and where it is. All I'm trying to do is define right now for myself where this is going and how it feels. It's a bit of a feeling thing with water. It's easy in the sense that it's not an exact science, but it is. It's not like a hand, where a hand looks like a hand or it doesn't look like a hand. Water is kind of one of those things where as long as you understand force and energy, then you're going to be okay with water, because that's really all you're doing. So when I come along the back side of this, what you're seeing me do is really break these things up here and making sure that what I'm not ever doing is painting a solid line. Because I can make it more solid, but you don't necessarily want to come back in after the fact and add black over top of it. You can. It's a thing. Sometimes you have to do that. Sorry. Get a little more white going on here. So again, I'm just kind of getting myself a little bit more of a milk texture paint going on in here. And I'm going to just bring this through. And what I don't want you to worry about doing at this point in time is trying to make it actually look like water, like finished. This is one of the things that I find people struggle with the most as they're learning to paint, or even painters who have been around for a long time, is letting something be built. Don't you find that, Steph? The whole process of letting your strokes build on each other as an artist versus letting trying to paint something that is looks finished on the first stroke, right?
Yeah, and it can take a while to get to that.
It can. So you have to sort of let it build. You definitely have to let it build. So this little piece that's kind of I've sketched into the back is this here. Water often has these where it's a piece that's kind of it's pulled up from its shell. It's got this energy, but it's not a real long piece. They're usually a little misshapen. They've got some they've got a little more depth to them of color. And then they also you know, are never even. So they always have these uneven things. So we're going to sort of get that put in there. And I'm just going to sort of start with that little uneven piece at the top and, you know, add that in, get this guy down to the bottom here. And I'm going to come back up here because remember that the piece that is behind that I sketched in there is actually behind. I'm not going to go too far just because I don't have a ruler, and I'm going to end up with my hand in my own paint. I'm not sure how many people get their hand in their paint, which is me always. So you notice how broken I'm letting everything be right now. Just sort of laying it in there in this kind of broken way. Because deciding that as I'm just getting my pieces sketched in, I'll decide later on when we go back into them. I'm going to add a piece in here. I'm going to decide later on to how much light or how thick that fold of water would be. And I'm just going to take this, get this little piece that kind of feels like it's shooting out of there. I feel like that one's. So water does this really interesting thing. I want to watch what I do right here. It folds into itself. And in order to make it feel like it's folding into itself, I'm going to create this line that starts here, comes down, and folds. Comes here, starts down, and folds. And it starts to fold. We're going to build this line that folds. It's a little more solid than most of the lines that you'll see in water. Pull a piece in here. Again, whether your crown splash has the same number of spikes as mine, or whether they're in exactly the same spot is just so ridiculously irrelevant. So don't worry about that. What you really want to focus on right now is, you know, what's the process to building? So I've got this piece that I'm coming out the side here. And what I'm going to do is I want you to look at how this, when water comes up, we have to consider, how do we transfer from a front piece to a back piece? So how do we transfer from seeing the outside of this piece to the inside of the one beside it? So what happens is we have this curled over piece that's coming up. We have the inside of this, but there's this transfer spot right here. So what you're seeing is this hard line. So I'm going to carry this line down. There's where your energy is coming from. It's coming right from the inside and it's coming up there. And then it's going to curl around and it's going to become part of the outside. So now we're seeing the inside of the water splash, the top of it, and now we're getting to the front. So this is that point where it transfers from the back over to the front. So now I'm going to make that be a thing. And I'm going to start it here. There's the inside. Okay, I'm going to pull it out. I'm still seeing the inside, but what I'm worried about is that top. And I'm going to build that top crown that comes around, and it becomes part of this. So that's how we're going to transfer it over from seeing the inside to being part of this outside. So now I'm going to make my paint even just a little more runny because I just want to get a sense of how this bottom feels to me. Okay, And I'm just going to kind of get a couple of pieces going on here. Sorry, a little too much paint there. All right, and I'm just going to get a little sense of my pieces. Okay, I'm doing this because what happens is this is never a solid line in here, and it's always a piece that comes into itself. Just gonna add a little tiny sense of shape, tiny sense of shape on that. All right. That was a really big sigh, Mike. Is this water drop boring you? Not at all, he says. What's that? Okay. Oh, okay. Sorry. Mike says he's gonna mute me for a second. I don't know why, but okay. For a second. Okay. Are we back? All right. Apparently, there was a problem with my sound. So thanks, Mike. Appreciate that. It's good to have good technical people on your crew. So we have Mike on our live stream feed right now. So what I'm doing right now is I'm just sort of laying in where this line is, right here. Right here, which is kind of just that underside of where it's going to be the brightest, and then where before it's fanning out. So that's what I'm laying in right there, is just that piece. And then I'm going to lay in a little bit where this is. And so we have a front, and then we have an inside back. And all I'm going to do is just sort of touch in where that is and outline it, because we're going to move to a gray color next. And it's good to know where these basic elements are when you start to sort of add that shading in. It's the mystery of water, eh, Steph? Steph is very focused over there.
Did you say something to me?
I did say something to you, apparently.
I didn't hear you. I heard you talk, but it was so quiet.
I said the mystery of water.
The mystery of water.
The mystery of water.
I'm learning right now so much. I should.
Are you learning?
Well, I haven't mastered water by any.
So we should have had you painting along or something.
Oh, that would
somebody
be fun.
else, like,
as a student. That'd be a really fun way to do something like this.
Yeah, it would. Actually, be a fun way to do something. So what I'm doing is, again, just sort of putting these things in. None of the things that I'm doing have to be like final lines, exact lines, because I just want to know where the things are, because with the next piece that we're going to do is I am going to go in, I'm going to lay this front line in, and this is the front piece of. So I am just going to kind of build this in here, decide, again, this is not an exact science by any stretch of the imagination. It's just, what you're thinking. And it's not your final line. We're going to go back. Depending on your brand of paint, depending on the brush you're using, you may have to go over this a lot of times. My paint is fairly watered down, which is why it's not bright white or solid yet. I'm not trying to make it a final thing. What I am going to do just because I want to get a sense again of that external energy and where this is going. Is I am going to lay in a couple of these other dots. So what you see I'm doing is I'm taking one side and I'm adding a heavier color or a heavier stroke to one side, and I'm adding a lighter stroke to the other side, and I'm not making it a complete circle ever, because water has no color, and all water does is pick up the color that's around it. So we have this little guy here, and we have this little guy here, which means from the backside, there's energy that's coming up this way, and it's tilting out. So it's shooting up and back. So if I follow that energy, it stands to reason that somewhere in here, going up and out, there is going to be additional bubbles. Now I put one here. You can see it came up from here, out from here, there, there. So you always have to be focused on where is my energy and then what's happening on those. So if I'm going to say take something that's going out this way, I don't like where I put it in here, so I'm actually going to take a little bit of a wet thing and take that one off. It's the beautiful thing of, I just didn't like it. So now I'm not even going to bother getting out my marking pencil. I'm just going to freehand it right here. Because I want there to be one that's coming in here somewhere. And it's going to be a little thinner at the top. And it's going to actually have a good, piece of where the light's going to catch it the most on the bottom side of it. And I might add one or two over here. Again, not making these solid. I'm going to come in and decide what those look like in their final pieces later on. I'm going to take this water a little bit up and coming off this side. So I haven't switched brushes yet, still using the same brush. Like I said, 90% of this paintbrush is going to be done with this brush. I'm going to have some of this energy where it curves around. There can be a water typically can come off of that side as well. And as it moves away from itself, it's always going to be thicker on the bottom and thinner at the top as it moves away from itself. So, keeping in mind that depending on how far you've gotten, not to worry if you're not as far as me. There are places you can always go back to. I'm going to let you kind of get caught up a little bit. How long we've been painting, Steph?
It's 1:34. So we started at 1.
Okay, cool. So I'm going to add a little Paynes Grey to my palette now, and I'm going to pick that same brush back up. Paynes Grey, for those of you who don't have Paynes Grey, is a blue-black. If I pull it off to the side, you can see how blue it is on my palette. So it's it's a bluey gray. If you don't have it, you can take a little bit of ivory black, a little bit of white, and add a little anthraquinine or a dark blue to it, not a green shade. You'll never get the same Paynes Grey kind of feeling. Paynes Grey is a great mixing block if you're trying to create a different hue of a color. So what I'm doing right now is I'm just gonna take a little bit of this, get it nice and wet off my brush. I've switched now to my number 12. Just feeling like it's gonna be a better brush for me in the moment, because I'm gonna add a little bit of shading. So what we're gonna do right now is we're gonna finish filling in the rest of what our drop looks like just by adding in some color. And we're going to fill in just that sort of transparency, and that's Paynes Grey is great for building that transparency. So I'm going to start in here. I'm going to show you in here. In this drop, you can see light hits on water as it stretches. In order to build that stretchy feeling of water, there has to be inconsistency in depth, in thickness. And then there also, so that means how much can you see through it? How much is the light capturing it? So that's essentially what you're doing right now, is figuring that piece out. So if I want to build A where it sits on the bottom, okay, so all I'm going to do is just say, okay, this is sitting in here. I'm going to build this piece down, build it out a little bit. This is definitely not a hard line of anything. If I want to make it a little bit lighter, I'm gonna mix a little bit of white with my paints, so it ends up being a blue or a slight blue. Yeah, a little too white on that one. Not an exact science, so never worry about that. If it feels too bright, it probably is. It's hard to know when you're mixing it on a white palette. I tend to use my hands a lot because right now, in order to build that sort of feeling of transparency, I'm going to lay it on and just kind of smudge it off a little bit. So I'm building that sort of, barely there color, but color. Barely there color coming on here, and just that sort of feeling that's coming through here. And so on the front of your water, what's happening here is where it's stretched the most, it's going to be the clearest. This light spot is actually light that's coming through here. You're seeing through the most transparent piece of the water. So what you're seeing is the underside of the water. So there's actually the water has no color here. There's nothing for it to capture. There's no light for it to capture. What we do want to do is build this where the light's hitting a little bit in a bit of a transparency coming up and underneath. So that you want to build it in the energy of. So normally what I'll do in that sense is I'll turn my brush around and I'll actually make sure that what I'm doing is I'm painting with the energy of the actual water. Okay, I'm going to take it up here and I'm going to start layering it on here, and I'm going to start painting it and actually get a sense of that energy that's coming through here, coming up here. Always going to let it come up and come up from this side and come up from that side. So I'm only building this sort of like bit of transparency coming through. Same with the inside of this. Just where the light is catching it. It's kind of it's a real wet paint. No big science to it here. Carrying it up. Gonna add some to the top. Maybe it's a little clearer there. Might add some to the bottom of each of these. Where it feels right. Just gonna add some pieces to it. And already it's starting to feel like it has some shape that makes sense. So that, as simple as that was, is that. So that's this layer right in here that I just did. Came in here, went up there, went in there. What I'm not worrying about is too terribly much how much this feels like the front is from the back, because we're going to worry about that afterwards. Sometimes when you have, like, I'm not sure I think I want this to be a little bit more colored in here. We'll make it stand out and separate. Don't worry if your highlight color comes all the way to the front. I'll show you how to separate the back and make the back push back. You know, sometimes you have to kind of make sure you're where it's catching, especially on this side, where your highlight's catching. Sometimes it comes right up against this little edge lip. And then you're like, well, how do I make it step back? We're going to worry about that at the very end. I will show you how to get there. So I'm going to jump back to my number 8 pointed. So a smaller just gives me a bit more of a finer tip. And I'm going to go back. And I'm going to add in some of these lines in here. And it's like a stress line that comes up where your water and where it's like a ripple line. So where your water ripples over, and we're going to add those in and make these a little more defined. So right in here, I'm going to this side. I'm going to add all of these little kind of what would be twists and ripples within the shoots themselves. So water takes these interesting shapes. There's that shape, and I'm going to paint it off to the side for you. Water does this. There's this shape, okay, and it creates this highlight in there. There's this shape, okay, it's an under, and then there's an overhook, and what I've just done is created this shape and this shape. Those get repeated down the sides, coming up and down, so that getting repeated down, back, back again, back again, back again. And what you're doing is you're just creating this little this little texture in the water where the light is catching it, this little ripple. Consider it a ripple. And that's as simple as it is. And you can just keep going and making them as detailed as you want. As I'm coming through here, I'm going to build this out to have a piece where it's a little thicker strand and the water's going to catch it. It's going to come up. And then I'm going to build that side shape through here again. Another little highlight piece. And this shape coming up here and back down again. Up here and back down again. Water has those shapes in it. And you can always use those to create these little bit of stresses. And you can see as I'm laying down my paint and I'm laying down my different textures, okay, I'm coming back up. This is the same shape, but now it's reversed. Now all I've done is I've reversed it. All I've done is reverse it in there. So what I've done is I've created this thing it's random but not random, if that makes sense, which I think it does make sense, because that's what water is. It is random, but there's things that are not random about it. So as this piece here comes up, I'm actually going to add another sort of little splash ball at the end of it, you know. And those are not solid necessarily. Pull it out, press down, tip up, and add a little piece to the end. and it creates these little energy pieces. So I'm going to say if you are keeping up, great. If you're not, don't worry about it, because we're going to go through the whole thing and worry about painting one side of it and then adding to it later on. I'm going through now and I'm going to just add. I'm going to add on some additional texture, additional color to the top. And you can see that what I'm doing is really making a lot of these shapes and a lot of these shapes, nothing being really solid.
Also, remember that you can view this forever.
Oh yes, you can view it forever.
Forever.
Yeah, you know. So what can happen is I'm gonna paint a little bit. You know, we don't want to make a 10-hour video here. So if you get one side of it done, so think about that from a focus standpoint. If you have one side of it done, the theory is the same from this half is to this half. So you can get this side, paint half of it. Don't get too stressed about catching up, and finish the other half. You know, I'm gonna paint a little bit more of this line on the front here. This is kind of if you do one thing right now, I would say follow along and do this, because all of these points are going to be exactly the same as what we just did here, just opposite coloring. So I'm going to take this tiny little tip, and this is where I'm going to put in those little waves. And it's intuitive as to how many to do and how close together. They sort of have this random little there's no real answer. It's what makes sense. There's always some at the front on the underside, and then there's always some on the front point that you can see. So where it's curving down and it's going to start to curve away, there's always going to be some there. Always. If the light is coming from that direction. And as they come around, what we're going to start to do is we're going to say, but the water is heading in this direction. So it's kind of like you're making a bit of a which way is the water heading thing. They're not solid. You know, you're almost like doing little arrows to, hey, the water's going that way. Make it go that way. It's all about energy and light. That's what water is. And honestly, people email me, write me all the time and say, how do you paint water? It's so hard. How do you paint water? And I'm just like, oh my gosh, water is actually so forgiving. You can just, you know, you can make the water be as big or as little as you want. There's two things you can't do with water, and that is change flow. So if, for example, the energy's coming this way, you can't suddenly take one of these and have it go the other way. It doesn't work. Your water will look bad then. So you can't do that, and you can't change your light source. So if my light source is up here, that means that all my tops have to have light. So if I want my light's going to come down, it's going to hit that front edge. It's going to hit that curled edge. It's going to hit the inside of that. It's going to hit the top edge of the back, the top edge. And it's also going to come through and, oddly enough, shine at the back of this. The back. Yes, the back. So light and energy are the only two things that you always have to keep in mind about water. And as long as you don't mess with that, you'll be fine. The rest, the rest is just, make it what you want. You know, make it what you want. So I'm just going to add a little bit of top. Depending on the white you're using, I'm using a titanium white. I like titanium white. It has the most opacity. And of course, those of you who know me know that I'm a real golden fan. I love golden paint. Depending on the brand of paint that you're using, it depends on how many layers you're going to have to go over to make that white really opaque and really stand out on its brightest highlights. All right, so I'm going to take some of this and I'm just going to kind of say, all right, I want to make this feel like something right here now. Coming to this side, I curl this round, and I'm also going to make sure that I hit the inside of this. It's nothing solid. Just going to hit it on the thing, and I'm going to have this water be twisting around. And in order to make it feel like it's twisting around, I'm just going to curl it to the outside. So that's how you're doing that on that side. Get some solid white coming in there. And I'm going to add a little more of this white highlight in here. And that's going to be the most solid thing in the whole painting. Now, not sure if you can hear all the excitement going on up here. So I am going to put some of this in here now, which is that under shadow. So this is a layer. If my light's coming down here, it's hitting in the center. It's going to catch the front of the center. It's going to be the lightest at the back where I'm seeing through more and more layers of water, but there's going to be a secondary highlight that sits underneath. So it's light hitting here. Then there's going to be where it's stretched the most. You'll never see this. It starts to curve out, but there's always going to be this little bit of a bright spot underneath. And that's where we're going to lay that in right here. So we're just going to, it's never solid, okay? Just going to pull it from one side to the other. But I am just going to find that thing. It's not a solid thing. And you just want to lay it in there in a way that suggests shape, that stays with the same shape. And you can see that my paint is fairly wet, and all I'm doing is just kind of using my finger to pull it across in there, and I pull this up and across, and as it gets to the edge there, it might randomly start to spill out and come out to there. And pull this back up. Alright, there's going to be this funny little piece here. It's always that if I'm twisting it in, at what point in time is the light catching the inside twist? Always that thing. So here's the underside. It's coming up, light's hitting on the inside. So remember, this is an inside. So you're seeing it through something. And I'm going to say that the light is hitting on that inside. So I'm going to take, a little bit of white with Paynes Grey. Just pick up a little Paynes Grey with it. Just because I don't want it to be super bright. And I'm just going to lay it in about halfway between this spot and this spot. And I'm just going to curl it up, take it across, and this line is always going to have a bit of an upwards energy to it. So it's never going to be, as it gets to the edge, it can be a little more defined. But in that center spot, it's not usually ever going to have a solid, you know, energy. And as it gets towards points, you got to remember that that's pulling back up again. Okay. So I might want to add in this point in time a little bit more directional things in here. So some of these are solid, some of these are not. I'm going to add a little bit more direction so that this still feels like it has that pulling, pushing energy. So as I'm going through, I haven't added any more paint yet to my thing, but I'm going to start to pull it through here. And I always, you know, do a bit of a cheater brush. You know, it's never a solid stroke. It's more, you know, laying in some energy into it. Same with the back, always with the back. Just, you know, letting it be not quite solid, and then, but always following up. You know, which way is it flowing? How's it feeling? Tuck a little bit on the inside of this and on each of my things. You know, adding a little here and there. What do we think, Steph?
It is coming together.
It's coming together.
Yeah.
How much time we at?
We're at an hour.
Cool. That's good. So we're
good?
gonna so you know, again, water is never, it usually takes the surrounding it has. For those of you who know, black always picks up a hue of blue as you lighten it up. So I'm going to take a little bit of this, and how do you pronounce this? Anthacrynine? Anthacrynone? I think we should write to Golden.
Please
tell us how to pronounce this blue.
I call it I don't know what I call it. Anthacrynone.
I know, but it's not quinine. It's quinone. It's anthacrynone. It's like, I don't know, Mike. You pronounce it for us. ANTHRAQUINONE. He's just laughing. Okay, Mike thinks it's actually just like, okay, so you can see that that's a really pretty blue. This is my favorite blue of all blues. If you don't have a blue that dark, if you're starting with a primary cyan, which happens to be a super yellow blue, or you even have a phthalo blue, green shade, you know, add a little Paynes to it or add a little black to it, you know, just to sort of make it a little darker. I'm just adding the tiniest bit of blue to my palette and dry brushing. For those of you who can't see what I do on my apron, I actually, you know, wipe crap off my apron. You know, if I have a bit of paint and I want to just, I'm not a paper towel kind of girl. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually add a little interest to here. So depending on what paint your background was, because my background is black, I'm going to choose blue. If I could also choose some red, so you could do a bit of red in here. If your background is green, you're going to add a little green in here. You're going to add a little green red, actually, something in there. So if you're orange, so what you're doing is you're trying to pick up a hue that is what your background is, because that's what water does. It catches what your background is. And we're looking at this in here, and in here. We're just adding a little bit of color. So what it's doing is it's reflecting what's around on the other side of it. So we're catching that other side. So now add a little blue in here. You can see it just lay down. It's not a lot, just tiniest bit here and there. Just adding it up, kind of making it, just catching it on the underside. And again, this is so not an exact science. Just laying a bit of color down. That's it. That's it. Isn't that so pretty, Steph? And clearly I put way too much blue on my palette for that. Ugh. So this is where I will switch off to one more brush. You can use a fatter round if you have one. This again is a 16 round. This is where I'll switch off to a filbert. This is a Escoda 14 pointed filbert. So a fatter round or a pointed filbert or even a round filbert will do, or a Sprite. Any one of those brushes will work in this case. What you want to do is you want to get something that can get you a bit of surface. That's really what the most important part of this whole thing is. So I'm going to get this, and I'm going to add only Paynes, nothing else, just Paynes. Because my background is black. Okay, and I'm just going to build in some additional texture. And the more you add texture in here, the more that makes sense to what water does and what water is. So as I'm doing through this, so I'm just slightly hazing out my black background is really what I'm doing. Take a little bit up here, take a little bit up there, adding just that texture into my water. This time building my texture onto my water. And it's the only time that I will actually just take a bit of a darker color, because what I want to do is I want to say, you know, there is water in front of this black. If you left it solid black, it would never feel like you have that you're looking through something, right, Steph? You understand? Steph gets what I mean, I think. Does that make sense to you?
Did you just ask me a question?
I did ask you a question.
As I put the headphones over my ears.
Yeah,
I'm listening to the 15.
Oh, so Steph is watching the live feed.
I'm listening to future us.
Okay. So our last piece to this whole puzzle, actually second last piece, is to really make these highlight pieces stand out, depending again on your brand of paint. Whether you're using a high quality paint, whether you're using a student grade paint, you know, I highly recommend a golden or a Liquitex soft body. They also come in heavy body. I'm not using a heavy body for this purpose because water actually requires so much layering that to use a heavy body, you're actually watering it down more than 50%. I don't like doing that with paint. It doesn't have good adherence then. So what we're going to do is just add some more of these lines. So getting a wet brush, and I still have the same white on my palette.
Nita, can you explain to people why they don't want to be watering their paint down that much?
Why they don't want to water
just
their paint down?
Yeah, in case they need to know that yet. It's important.
So if you water your paint down more than 50%, it actually doesn't adhere to the canvas as well. So you really shouldn't water. You shouldn't be dumping. If you think about what paint is it's plastic particles, so I'm going to explain that. I'm going to explain what I'm doing, and then I'm going to explain that. So what I'm doing right now is I'm actually going to decide every brightest highlight spot where that is, and I've gone back to my number 8 pointed brush, and you can see it's got a beautiful little point on it. And I'll tell you something, if you invest in yourself, go out, buy good brushes. Kolinsky, Escoda, two brands that I absolutely love. I've had this brush specifically for probably 10 years. And I'll tell you how you can keep it clean. You know, my friends who know me know I'm a bit of a brush Nazi. I am. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay in those highlights, and then I'm going to talk to you about that. So I'm going to pick those really, really, really bright spots, and I'm just going to just go over those like, lay down a little bit of a thicker paint onto it. Okay, just gonna get that, and you can see the difference. What it does is it's just adding a little bit of a texture. So again, depending on how much you've watered down your paint, your brand of paint, you actually may have to do this 2 or 3 times, because the less, and I hate to say less expensive, but it is true. But the more quality your paint, the more pigment it has. So why don't we water our paint down more than 50%? Is because it's made of binder, water, and plastic particles, and acrylic paint is anyways, and it won't adhere to what you're doing is you're separating out those plastic particles too much. It's not a good adherence to your canvas, especially for your base or anything like that. You don't ever want to do that. So this is a little trick. I'm going to show you a little trick. As I'm coming at these guys who are a little pointed on the bottom, I'll flip my brush around. I'll start at the bottom so I can get that point, and then I'll pull it up. So what I'm doing is I'm catching that bottom tip, pulling it up, coming around. And same with these guys. I often will turn my brush around and pull it in the energy of what it is that I'm painting. So letting it pick that energy up. So I'm going to hit this top piece here with some light. Again, I'm not keeping it really solid in its structure right now, but I am going to add a little bit of places inside where it's catching the light. Does that make sense, Steph?
Absolutely.
Okay, good. Thank you. Sometimes I'm rambling on here and don't know if I'm making any sense. Make this line a little thicker, and I'm still letting that blue sort of come through, but I'm just gonna make it a little bit more solid, not solid. If that makes sense.
It does, and
Gosh.
the way that you're breaking it down is really helpful. So I'm watching this and learning so much.
Are you really?
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank
and
you.
I've got to say, this is reminding me of how helpful it can be to step away from your work when I'm looking at it from this distance and then looking at it in the screen. It looks like two different paintings when it's up close versus far away.
Yes, and that's always true, right? One of the things that I do, it's a good point, actually. I always do this. Normally, like those of you who know that I do realism, I at the end of a painting, I will post these progress videos of how I painted my painting, right? And the reason I have these progress videos is because every hour I take a photo of my painting. And, approximately, it's not a hard and fast rule, but approximately every hour. And the reason I do a painting or a photo every hour is, and I do it as a photograph, is because it allows you to sort of, to step away, to get really far away from it, and to feel if the energy is feeling right, if it allows you to see you need to get distance. You just need to get distance, but that's really how that started for me. I'm just going to add a little bit more depth in here. And so last couple little things, and then and you're going to go away and spend some time on this after we're quote unquote done, because I can keep going over it. You're going to make this feel as bright or as dark as you want this to feel. So the last thing that we want to really focus on is this. These lines a little here. Because what happens is there's always these spots on a water splash that as it goes further away, they get smaller and smaller. So I always go to my my pointy brush again. I'm still with that number 8 pointed round. If you don't have that and you feel like you want to use this is a this is a rigger. So a rigger is a liner that has really long bristles. That's what a rigger is. So you can see that here. It's nice long bristles. And or you can do just a fine brush, like a pointed brush. I find these actually not good for this purpose or as good for this purpose. The other brush that you can use is a dagger. A dagger is an angled brush. So again, this is one of my favorite brushes, but as long as you can get a point, a pointed round is perfectly sufficient. One of the biggest things that I find when I have somebody who's coming into my class, and I don't know about you, Steph, and they're fairly new to painting, I spend a lot of time getting them to move to bigger brushes. It's a thing. So I'm going to start, because if you remember how these drops look, they're fatter at the bottom. So we're making these splashes here, and they're fatter at the bottom. As the energy moves away, they get thinned out, and they're just a solid line. That's all they are. And so I might put one here, and I'm going to start with my tip, and I'm just going to lay it down ever so gently. And I'm just going to lay this guy down ever so gently. Just going to lay this guy down. And I'm going to put a few of them there. That's it. And I might put one there, put one there. You know, it's a feel, you know. They always come up and off. I don't like the way that one happened. Here, make it bigger. And I'm just going to stick one down in there. I feel like every time I do this and I'm doing repeated things, I start to feel like Bob Ross. And happy little cloud here, and a happy little drip there. So you can add as many as you want. This guy right here, I'm going to add some stuff to him because I'm not really all that happy with how it's got some. Just going to add a little bit of roughness, so to speak, to him. Just add something that's kind of coming up in here. It's always this. Does it have that feeling? Does it have that energy that I want it to have? You know, did it come away feeling like that? You know, had that curl. This guy right here, I'm gonna get this little bit of a. Okay, so now last thing before I then give you some final pointers. I'm going to take a tiny bit of black. So out of all of this outside of the background, I got to tell you, one of these days I'm going to write to Liquitex and I'm going to complain because they changed their containers. Do you see these containers?
Yeah, I remember them from the mural.
What did they do? Okay, so the inside of the lid has no point. They've got these things. You use them. Yesterday, I cleaned this entire thing out, and it's already dried into the tip. Why? I'm telling you. Pet peeve there, people. Pet peeve. I'm actually
Maybe
really
they'll see this video and
maybe,
make some
and they'll say,
changes.
"Oh, we're really sorry, Anita." So I'm getting some black, and I'm getting a little bit of solid black. So the thing that I really want to make sure, you see in here, thing that I don't like is there's no definition between this guy and this guy. So how do I make this one move back and this one move forward? And how do I make this feel separate from this? How do I make this move back from that? So it's about how am I positioning everything in my painting. And that's with straight black. So if I want to start stepping this guy back in here, what I'm going to do is right in behind here, right along that edge, I'm going to paint it out dark. And the moment I paint that out dark and clean that up, see how that immediately jumped that back? All right, so same thing with this, okay? If I want to, I'd add a little black. Get some real black going on here. So if I want to move this guy back in here, right? I'm just going to add a little bit of depth right to the bottom of it. And what that did is it moved it, it shifted it back. Add a little darkness there. Add a little dark depth in there. I want to take this line and I want to create a clean idea of what this is and that it's behind that. All I did was add the tiniest bit of black right in there, and same with this. Okay, sorry. I'm going to take this, and as long as I add a little bit of depth right in there, what that does is it automatically starts to move things from the foreground to the background. Again, if I want to sort of make this feel a little bit more transparent, I can actually add a little texture just by adding some black again to this. And I'll always go back into certain parts of the thickest part of my my water drop, and as water stretches, it's its most transparent. So then whatever my background color is what I'm going to add into those things. So where it stretches, and I'll always add a little bit of texture coming up. It again helps to define some of those things. All right, questions of the day. Steph, do we have any questions?
No, everyone's so quiet.
Everyone's so quiet today.
Painting
You can
away.
always tell when people are like so focused on their painting because they're so quiet. So I'm going to say just keep doing more of the same.
How do we know when to stop?
How do you know when to stop? That's a good question. You know, normally I do what you suggested. So if I was going to continue on this painting, for example, and build it up more, I would actually add just like more highlight across that back. Give this a little more texture in here and add more highlight across the back. You step back and you look at it. You know, put it on the wall and walk 20 feet away from it at least and see how it feels to you. Always see how it feels without looking at the brush strokes that you hate. And I'm going to do this because talking to Steph, who happens to be over there, but my camera's over here. So I always do that. I always hang it on the wall. And I walk away from it 20 feet. If I don't have a space that's big enough to walk away 20 feet, I do in this space, which is absolutely fabulous because this is such a great space. And when we're out of this pandemic, I hope you all come and visit me here. And if I can't do that, I take a picture on my cell phone, and then I hold my cell phone out. My cell phone disappeared. Mike stole it from me. Apparently, it was in my thing. I actually, I take a photo. Thanks, Mike. I take a photo with my camera, and then I hold my phone out this far. I don't look at it like this, going, oh my God, and zoom in on it, because that's not the point. The real point here is to actually get some distance. So I actually will look at it like this and I go, how does it feel? Because what that allows you to do is it allows you to stop seeing all the little brush strokes. It allows you to see it a little more objectively, which is a really hard thing to do as an artist, to see your own work objectively. And if I'm really unsure, um, I think it should be done. I listen to the first time that my head tells me it should be done, and I walk away. Um, I think that as an artist, you really need to develop your intuition and just say, "Okay, it's done. It's done." Walk away. If you don't believe yourself when you say it's done, or you're that intuition, trust that intuition. Walk away from it. Don't sign it. This is my rule. I don't sign it. Then I just walk away, and I come back and I see it again another day, or an hour later, or half an hour later. I go do something. Go for a walk. Go play with your kitten, your dog, your whatever. Go do one of those things for an hour and then come back to it and look at it again. And as you're walking into the room, when I walk into my studio, I always do this: is I don't walk in looking for my canvas. I walk in with my eyes closed. I open my eyes and I pay attention to what I first feel when I first see it. I don't pay attention to that voice that sees the thing that I struggled with. Haha. Right? And I know, and then I know if it's done. And I always listen to that thing that says, okay, I'm ready to sign it now. So I hope you enjoyed this. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. We're always available by email. Drop us a comment on this YouTube video after it's run live. You can always watch this and rewatch it and rewatch it. If you enjoyed this, please do me a favor and like this video. We are in the process right now of doing a whole lot of really great things. We have a paint night tomorrow night. If you go to ABT2 CRe8, so www.ABT2CRe, the number 8.shop. You can still sign up for paint night. Steph is teaching that tomorrow night. Steph, what are you doing again?
Magnolia branches.
Oh, magnolia branches. So go check it out. It's family friendly. It's beginner friendly. Go check that out. Next week, Steph is going to be doing a gouache. All about gouache. Oh my God, which I'm actually excited about because I've not done gouache. I've not worked with gouache before. In fact, I just learned how to pronounce it.
Oh, it's exciting.
It is exciting. I'm super excited about that. So that is going to be one of our free learning things. And I am going to be starting a 2-part complex paint theory for artists. So if you want to know all about colors, mixing and all that kind of fun stuff, it's going to be a 2-part thing, and that's also going to be free, and I'm going to be starting that next week. So stay tuned for that. Hang out to our social media channels and make sure you're paying attention there, or make sure you're subscribed to our YouTube channel where we host all of our stuff. Okay, so I want to see what you did. Okay, I want to see you post it on social media. We do a giveaway every month. So please post what you've done on Instagram or Facebook, and make sure that you tag us at Creative Nomad Studios, and also hashtag ABT2CRe8 or hashtag Creative Nomad Studios. And once a month, at the end of this month, we will be doing a giveaway. So as long as you've done that, we'll enter you into our draw. We'll be doing a giveaway at the end of this month. Listen, hope you join us again. Last little final note. I said I would cover this at the very end. Brushes. These brushes, expensive? Yes, they are. Worth it? Yes, they are. Buy good brushes. Buy the best brushes you can afford. Buy one at a time. Buy them when they're on sale. Please do yourself a favor and buy good brushes. I did one time, slowly but surely bought really good, expensive brushes. These are definitely my favorite. I have literally had this brush for like maybe 15 years, which is crazy because it still has the most amazing tip on it. Good brushes. Brush cleaner, people. Brush cleaner. Get this brush cleaner, get good brushes, and your investment will pay off in the long run. So, on that note, I say farewell. Thanks for tuning in. Reach out to me if you have any questions at all. Info at creativenomadstudios.ca. I will get back to you with whatever answers I have. All right. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for tuning in. Thank you, Mike, for being on camera. Thank you, staff, for monitoring our live feed. And we'll see you again. Take care.